Hello Dimple, welcome to the new session of our podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Johnny. A very good evening. I'm good. How about you?
I am doing great. So, this particular session, we'll be speaking about something that almost everyone listening to this podcast has faced, and that is rejection,
Mm.
and rejection that too sometimes without any feedback. So, today I want to talk about the real reasons of why a resume might get rejected, not the polite email reasons, but something which is much more real and raw from your perspective. So, I want to start with this note that there are a lot of these myths that are around re- rejections. Okay. And a resume gets rejected for quite a lot of reasons. But I just want to break it down into certain parts so that our listeners can, go through this podcast. I'm not talking about finding a solution to the problem, but first let's identify the problem and why that happens a lot. Okay.
Okay.
So starting with the first myth that I have, or probably this is something that has been asked around forums, is that do these resume templates, specifically these modern CVs, these designer templates, these Canva resumes, and some even add photos. And in terms of your experience, what kind of resumes actually get rejected instantly?
So, to give you an answer to that question, an instant rejection is does not happen at least at a level where a person is looking at it. The rejection only happens if the CV is very badly formatted, or there are grammatical errors in it, or the required information is missing.
Correct.
So, if I have to see gaps in career or in education, it can be a reason for rejection.
Mhm.
Or, like I said, formatting could have been a one-page CV, but it is a three-page CV, missing lines and all of that.
And I think it's like probably a recruiter might have like a 30-second time to look at your
6 to 8
resume.
seconds.
Yeah, it's even less, like
Yes.
6 to 8 seconds. And if you make a 3-page CV
Mm-hmm.
and it's not properly formatted, so that can be a reason of a rejection. And when I say formatting, it's like grammatical errors
Mm-hmm.
and not properly sequenced work experience, probably.
Yes.
And yeah, so the template of that particular resume needs to be in, like, properly formatted. So
Yeah.
formatting is quite important.
Formatting and sequencing will give you a win situation.
But these designer templates, how, like, have you do you think that was it necessary? Not necessary.
Honestly, not necessary. If you go on Naukri.com, it gives you a couple of free templates, and I have designed my own CV and couple of my friends' CVs from the free templates, and it just looks fine, and it just looks as crisp as you want it to be.
Okay. Then the next thing that a lot of people would like to know is that what goes into a resume, and there are like three parts to it, like top, middle, and bottom of the resume. So in a very general sense, how would you design it?
A very good understanding of how to design it. You can go by the name, basics about you, your phone number and email address, and probably your address also, because location is become a huge concern, and we look at it very. I mean, it's important, right? Apart from that, sequencing in terms of education first and then work experience. So, work experience, when you talk about it, always remember that the most recent experience comes first, and it goes in the descending order. Ascending order is a strict no no. Again, similarly, it goes for qualifications. Your most recent qualification becomes the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, your middle will always be full of your work experience for an experienced person. If you're a fresher, then probably you can include a picture of yourself. Not necessary, but in some frontline roles, it is required. So, I have said this earlier, that if a recruiter asks you to put a picture of you, then give it to them. Otherwise, it's not necessary.
Most of the time, it's not necessary.
Most of
Yes,
the
but
time,
I
it's
think picture-based resumes are required if it's a video call interview, purely VC interview. For in my experience, I have seen that.
not really. Like I said, it's for more for frontline people. So where you have, in retail shops,
Hmm.
that's required in cabin crew sort of roles. Again, that's one thing. That's one area where they need to look at the picture of the person. So that's where it is required. Otherwise, if you talk about a tech role in general, a manufacturing role, an HR role, a finance role, it's not required.
Not required. Yeah. And the resume with photos, normally, is it harmless or risky? In my experience, I remember I have normally in our organization, we do a lot of virtual interviews because the candidates are sometimes based in different locations or parts of country. So the only thing that they require is that okay, the photo is matching with the person. That's the only thing, because we're doing it on a video interview. When we actually call them, we already verify like their probably their ID cards or something like that. But in when it's VC, we ask for a photo so that when the call happens, so we can verify that oh, this is the same person. But otherwise, I don't feel that it's necessary. But say for example, even if you didn't ask for it and you put that particular thing, that oh, is it harmless or is it risky?
To an employer, it is good, right? Because a lot of frauds are happening around that. You have one person who's giving the interview and a completely different person who's actually appearing for the interview.
Yeah.
So someone who's shortlisted is different. The one who you can see in front of your camera is different. That's become very common these days. That's one. Also, someone who's interviewed and the person who's joined, that has again become a challenge because that's also happening. So, having a photo on your resume, or probably if your recruiter is asking for it, that only means that, I want the whole process to be very genuine. And I want the person whom I'm interviewing to join, not, to avoid these frauds and everything. That's a precaution probably your organization is taking right now.
And so normally it's like there is no conscious or unconscious form of bias because of that. Is what you
There's no bias.
okay.
No.
Also, this is a very hot topic, is or probably a controversial topic, lying on resumes. Uh, Normally, how do you catch it?
Lying on resumes, I mean, there are very few ways to catch it, to be honest. That's why today a recruiter calls have become very detailed. I mean, I used to not ask too many questions earlier when probably I just started my career. I was not asking too many questions. But today we ask candidates a lot of questions around what they do. Because if they're lying in their resumes, we will know that over the phone call. Apart from that, when I have to review a resume and see if they are lying, the chances are pretty low. Probably one or two factors can be, they've just joined a job and that job description is larger than the job description of the 4-year experience. That's one way of catching a lie. Other than that, in tech roles, maybe project per se, the hiring manager can catch it, but at recruiter level, I can't.
Yeah, I think this is more at during the interview or later background.
During interviews,
Because
during interviews,
yeah,
the hiring managers are very sharp. I mean, the tech guys or whoever, they feel that they can easily lie on their resumes, put up skills they don't have, and it is possible to catch in 10 minutes. The interviews get over within 10 minutes or 5 minutes. It's that easy.
I remember this. It has happened like to so I remember these interviews that recently happened, and I'm part of the tech panelists when I take the interviews. So the very first thing that gets caught is they use these nice catchphrases for this particular job description, and then I start asking some questions around those things, and they're like, "No, I'm not sure of what exactly is this, what exactly is that." And after probably the second or third question, I come to know that this particular person has lied on the resume, because you write something but you don't know about it is quite weird.
There you
Yeah, and this mainly happens with freshers a
Mhm.
lot. Like once they, or either they're new or 6 months into the work and they wrote some fancy words, but they don't know anything about that particular thing. So it's quite weird that you write something in your resume, but you didn't have the mindset to check it
Mhm.
or probably prepare for it.
These are very common mistakes.
Yeah, which also talks a lot about that particular person.
Right.
And
So today, in general, people know how to get their CV shortlisted by adding the keywords that your recruiter will search. They know that.
yeah,
But what they don't know is the practice and the experience that you may or may not have on the skill that you've already mentioned in your CV, because your hiring panel or manager will cross question you in depth, and that's where they get caught.
true. And the next thing is about diversity. Uh, so diversity hiring, is it uh, is it something that companies are consciously now doing it, or is it still like, okay, fine, it's not necessary?
Today, people are consciously doing it. Yes, I would say it is becoming necessary day by day. And diversity hiring gives a lot of scope to, not only women candidates to come up, but also, various other people who have the skills required for the job. So, it's a great way to hire people who actually have the skills to do a particular job. And this practice, I think companies should follow and come up with these sort of hirings periodically, in their hiring calendar for the year. They should
And
have
does
it.
it like ever happen? Like, have you seen a situation where there was a very good candidate who was not selected, and another candidate was picked because of the diversity goals? Does that happen way too often?
Not too often, but it might happen.
Yes.
Yes, it might happen.
Yeah.
Because, in diversity hiring, we are obviously looking for that particular candidate, could be women, could be others, right?
Mm.
So we are looking at that first and then the skills.
Okay.
So it might happen, but it's something that one can overcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like, in because you work for a listed firm now, and obviously they have their own goals of diversity as such. So in a situation, have you ever come across that, okay, sometimes competence is compromised, or is it like more of a tiebreaker situation? Like, what happens is you would be like, okay, because of diversity, I will have to hire this person, but is that person competent or not competent? Does that situation happens more often?
Like I said, it doesn't happen more often. You can't have too many people with less skills, and we are talking about diversity. We can't do that, because if company is building a team, then they have to have competent people. They can't be having diverse people and not competent.
Yes.
So, if I have to say it happens, maybe it does to a very less extent, just to fulfill the diversity criteria. But it doesn't happen too often that you have less competent people.
And what are the diversity trends? Like, are we talking about certain trends that are being followed right now? Like, say, for example, women being hired, or hiring from the disability group.
Mhm.
That's some of the examples. So, have you seen any trends lately?
See, there are no trends as such, but where it comes handy to a company is that one is satisfy the diversity hiring criteria where it's required, and second, also, there is a lot of honestly, there's a lot of cost benefit to attached to it. Yeah, so that is something that happens. Yes, I would say.
Okay. And it has like, and when you say cost and benefits,
You want me to elaborate that?
yeah, slight on that topic.
So what happens is, say recently I hired for somebody. They wanted a good tech guy.
Mm.
Okay, and they said, even if this person, say, has some sort of disability, can sit in the office and perform this work,
Mhm.
I'm okay. Should be technically sound. And that was a major requirement. Even the language was not a barrier.
Mm.
They could speak in Hindi, Marathi, whatever they want. They just should be technically sound. And there were 4 criteria given to that technicality.
Mm.
Okay. And they were okay to move ahead because in that particular role, there was a budget which was too low for that role. And we filled that criteria and hired somebody similarly. So yeah, that's the kind of cost benefit I'm talking about.
So this brings me to my next question. Pre-employment tests, do they still matter? And when I say pre-employment test, in the sense aptitude test, psychometric test, do companies still put money into these, or are these just formalities now?
Yes, Johnny, both are very important these days. And I think all of the companies I worked with had one of these tests, at least. In a lot of companies, you will see both because both are important at their own stages of the interviews. So, for example, if I talk about aptitude test, that is mostly taken as the first round for a lot of roles because aptitude test usually tests your grammar and normal mathematics. So if somebody fails in an aptitude test, he or she does not go for interviews. So that's where it stands, and it helps filter a lot of those freshers, who fail these tests usually. And when we talk about psychometric tests, these are usually done for mid to CXO level positions because psychometric test gives you an assessment of cultural fitment of the person. And for freshers, that's usually not important. Candidate situation.
Mhm.
Today, it has become extremely important to assess these fitments because they can be a deal breaker in the first month. The employer will know that this person is not going to work. So, in psychometric tests, how it works is there are a couple of methods which are commonly available in the market. And one of those methods, I'd like to explain and give an understanding as to how it helps the organization. So, one of the good methods is a DISC assessment, which is DISC. The elaboration goes like this: it's dominance, integrity, steadiness, and compliance. These are the four parameters on which the person is assessed. Now, in a lot of roles, combination works. In some roles, just one works. So, for example, if you consider a sales role, and their dominance and integrity both are higher. That's an ideal profile for a sales role. And steadiness and compliances can be average, can be low. It's just fine. But if the dominance is low, which means their leadership values are low, then it is something that is taken as a red flag. But are decisions made just by these aspects? The answer is no. If the dominance is extremely low, decision might be made basis also how the interview feedback comes in. So these assessments, especially when you talk about psychometric assessments, they are just a part which helps make the hiring decision. Is it a standalone factor to decide? No. But aptitude test is something, that can break a deal considering it, if the person cannot do basic mathematics and English, the answer for a hiring is a straight no. So that's how both the tests are important. And companies are putting a lot of money into both of these.
Nice way to put it in perspective. And then moving on, location based rejection, even when the candidate is a fit. Like many candidates might get rejected simply because of location, even when they're a great fit. So, does this still happen?
Yes. Because after COVID, companies are going back to a model where they want people to work from office. And if the person is located way too far, has to travel 2 hours a day, one side, then then companies do take decisions not to hire that person.
Okay. Yeah, and I think sometimes it can also be cost, logistics, pickup and drop policies as well. Yes.
Yeah, pickup and drop policies have a similar effect. They are made in such a way that the budgets and all of that is also a part
Yeah.
in terms of hiring.
Correct.
It also plays a part. So that's how the boundaries are created for logistics.
And this is something that on some of the forums was asked that whether it affects if a person is an introvert or an extrovert. You may not know about it from the resume, obviously. It depends on what sometimes what I look at is, say, for example, is as a person outside work, what are their hobbies? Okay, so when I look at something like, oh, I like reading or I like listening to music, okay, so then they say that very prominently. So sometimes I feel that okay, because this person is already reading and doing this, so he's not a much outgoing person. But it can happen that they might be doing this when they are traveling or something like that. But if they write very few things over there in the interest section, so it sort of piques my imagination. Probably they might be an introvert because they only do very few things outside work. So
Mhm.
does that kind of bias come about introverts and extroverts? Of course, not at resume level, but probably when we're interviewing.
Too less, I feel. Whether the person is an introvert or an extrovert, as long as they're able to do their job well, that usually doesn't come up as a rejection criteria, I would say. Because if you have a introvert personality and you're able to lead a team, I don't need anything more from you as an organization. So it honestly does not impact it so much. And personally, I have not come across people who are introverts and are not doing their job well.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't be somebody who would, promote this thought that introverts cannot be hired for any position, be it a team lead or be it whatever. They can be hired and they can do a good job, because at the end of the day, at any particular role, you need the job to be done the way a company wants it. And as long as that is happening, I don't think introvert extrovert really matters.
Right. And finally, I think another example that I have, or probably another question. Finally, one question that has recently been in the forums is the age factor. So, is it like a silent filter? Because let's talk about age. Like, do middle-aged candidates get silently rejected either for being overqualified or too expensive?
See, in this forum, I would like to highlight the truth that really happens, and age bias is the truth in today's market.
Mhm.
I heard this long back in my career, I think 5 6 years back, that 50 plus people are not getting hired in Bangalore. And even, today we are also doing the same thing when it comes to hiring people for junior roles, for executive, senior executive levels. There is an age barrier, because how it works is, if person is 35 40ish and is applying for a senior executive sort of role, then it is understood that this person has not come up in their career too much. That's one thing that is a preconceived notion. So that's one thing that happens. Another thing is also with age, if your salary is not an X amount, that's where even your CV gets rejected.
Hmm.
So these are the kind of biases that are there. And more or less, if you ask me, they come up to be true when they are interviewed. So if one has to apply for these kind of roles, and they want to scale up in their life, they really need to take up some skill management, some upskill management sort of courses to get ahead in their career. It also indicates that they've been doing the same thing over and over for a long time, and if they need to change, they need to do something different.
Right. And this is our final segment. Before we close, so what are the absolute deal breakers, the things that make a recruiter say no instantly? So, no matter how good the resume looks.
If your skill is not matching, it's a straight no. If there are grammatical errors, it's a straight no.
Okay.
So that's one. If another thing is, if your CV is badly formatted, your experience, which is your first experience, is mentioned on the top, it's a straight no. So those are certain things due to which not even a recruiter, even if I send this CV to my hiring manager, they will reject it. And we have done all of that in our careers and taken those chances for candidates, but we know it doesn't work.
Right.
So it's not us who are rejecting in the first place. It is something that we have tried working out with others, with our hiring panels. It doesn't work.
And if you had one honest piece of advice to the job seekers, what would it be?
Today, jobs are not sitting on Naukri.com. So we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond LinkedIn. We need to go beyond job portals. We need to do something different. And there are a lot of videos. There's a lot of content available online to do that. So if you think just by applying on job portals and you'll be able to get a job, it's not going to happen. People got to do a lot more than that today, because the job market today is an employer market. It is still the same. I mean, last year when I was applying, it was the same, and even today, 1 year down the line, I'm seeing that the market is still the same. It's an employer market. So employees or candidates really need to scale up.
Sure. And thank you so much for all the insights that you've given. And in honesty, rejection doesn't always mean you're bad. Sometimes it just means that you don't fit into that system at that particular point of time. And and as you rightly said, that it is not only about what work you're doing. It's sometimes you have to go beyond work and build a character, build a profile which fits a story. It needs to say a story.
Yes.
So at some point of time tomorrow, you will not be looked at as just a candidate, but a candidate with a good story to back his experience is what I feel.
Absolutely.
So
And see, these stories can be in the form of achievements.
yeah,
It can also be in the form of say you worked for for one single company your whole life. You can actually show your promotions year on year or whatever, 2 years, 3 years. When you show that promotion, you give a story to the employer. When you talk about your achievements, you give a story.
correct.
When you talk about your hobbies, you give them a story.
Yes.
So once these things are focused upon and written well, and your summary, your job summary, that's most important, because that's the first thing that catches a recruiter's eye and a hiring manager's eye. So if that summary is crisp, then that's where you're giving again a story. So that story in 2 to 3 lines, if it is beautifully done, rightly done, then you got your interview cracked, or rather the shortlisting cracked. So yeah, that can be done.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Dimple, for doing this with us, and thank you to our listeners again. And if you have any questions or queries, you can give a like and subscribe into our WhatsApp channel that we have recently created. Oh, it's called as Corporate Elements, and you can also find us on the Substack platform as well, where you can leave your comments, queries, or anything that you want to talk about. Okay, so thank you so much, and have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you, Johnny.